TV production for this program was provided by Capstone Productions, Inc. and ephistory.com, the website for TV documentaries on DVD, and information about our webcast and radio broadcasts about El Paso history and heritage. Thank you for watching. The people of El Paso liked their history. Many gathered on March 22, 2014 for the second grassroots summit about El Paso's rich and authentic history and heritage. This time, the city helped out by donating use of the convention center. The goal of the all-day free event was to promote heritage tourism, and many people pitched in to help. The first summit in 2013 was proposed by the El Paso History Radio show as a way of networking El Paso's historic assets. This year's summit was even larger, with more exhibits, as well as workshops.
Let's get started.
And a town hall meeting that was streamed live on the internet.
We have put this panel together this afternoon to talk about heritage tourism and where El Paso could go and maybe should go in its promotion of its own heritage assets. Thank you all for coming in.
Partners in the 2014 summit were the El Paso Heritage Alliance, the El Paso County Historical Commission, Texas Senator Jose Rodriguez, and Destination El Paso.
It's my distinct pleasure to welcome you to the second annual El Paso Heritage Tourism Summit,
as well as the El Paso History Radio show. In the main hall, more than 40 exhibitors took part in the largest ever El Paso history trade show, with information about historic sites, museums, state parks, and local history groups of all kinds. During the summit, people were asked to vote for what they thought should be promoted about El Paso history. Then those topics were discussed during the 90-minute town hall meeting.
The first one was downtown buildings. Number 2, Old Town tourism. Number 3, missions. Number 4, Native Americans.
The day also
Number 5,
featured keynote speakers from state historical organizations who talked about how to leverage local history to make El Paso a destination city for heritage tourism.
It's important to talk about return on investment with historic preservation, and we have great numbers to share. I just want to make sure you all understand, as far as I'm concerned, it's a lot more than that. If that's all it was, I don't think it'd be worth doing. It's worth a lot more than that. So
there was a special presentation by Rosa Guerrero.
The Native American had their drum, and they danced for everything. They danced for the seasons, they danced for the rain, they had the rain dance. They danced for the corn dance. Very important. The Tiguas are still doing the corn dance, and many other tribes in the United States.
There were also Old West reenactors.
My firearm?
Your firearm.
Well, it's a Vaquero. It's 45 caliber and it's deadly. And I'm a dead-eye shot.
And prize giveaways.
Please do not here with the red tickets, for the drawing is going to be taking place in just a few minutes.
In the afternoon, educational sessions offered tips on working with volunteers, using social media, and getting publicity for historic places and events. Live streaming of the town hall meeting was produced by Capstone Productions and Aaron Barnes of Creative Lemonade. It was an historic day for El Paso's history industry. And now, in its entirety, here is the March 22, 2014 town hall meeting of the El Paso Heritage Tourism Summit, which was streamed live from the El Paso Convention Center. This is the wilderness of West Texas. Raw desert beauty almost untouched by man. 7,000 acres of territory cut by a single road. Morning light reveals the geological riches on the eastern slopes of this desert mountain. A mountain range that rises to more than 7,000 feet. and stretches for 15 miles. So it might be a surprise to learn that these majestic mountains, with their rugged canyons and natural springs, are inside the city limits of El Paso, Texas.
Thank you all for coming. I'm Jackson Polk, and welcome to the El Paso Heritage Tourism Summit Town Hall meeting. We have put this panel together this afternoon to talk about heritage tourism and where El Paso could go and maybe should go in its promotion of its own heritage assets. I thank you all for coming in today. We are with the El Paso History Radio show, Melissa and I. Good afternoon once again.
Good afternoon.
Hello,
Back.
hello one more time.
Yes.
And we also have are going to be joined today by our illustrious compadre in history, Bernie Sargent. So if Bernie would come on up, we thank you very much.
Yes,
for Bernie
sir. Thank
being here
you.
as well.
Great opportunity to be out here in front of the people. I didn't want to wear out my welcome because I've already talked an awful lot today, but thank you everybody for being here. This is just a great scenario, a great location, wonderful people up here. And I'll just take a moment to introduce these folks. I know that Jackson introduced himself and my lovely wife, Melissa. We also have here County Commissioner Vince Perez, City Representative Acosta, and State Representative Jose Rodriguez, who are going to join us today, and they're going to share with you their thoughts and hopefully take our thoughts back to the city, the county, and the state so we can move forward with our objective, and that is to make El Paso a place to go to, not through.
Also, Bernie, we're going to ask you to stick around if you don't mind and maybe help work the crowd a bit. Also, we have we guess you have your own opinion on some of the El Paso history.
No,
So
not
at some point, we're going to ask you to also express
My
that.
wife allows me to have an opinion once in a while.
Well, one thing I thought we'd do in getting into the idea of heritage tourism and what's important, we also have some elected officials. Senator Jose Rodriguez has been very out front in proposing and pushing heritage tourism with the committee. So we thought we'd ask each of these individuals representing the county, the city, and the state to give us a couple of minutes on their take on heritage tourism, what they think is important. Also, we have the list of people who voted today. We asked people coming into the summit to give us their impressions and opinions on what are actually the most important things to talk about in El Paso. So, Senator, if you don't mind, take a moment or two and tell us your thoughts.
Well, thank you very much, Jackson, and thank you for the work that you and Bernie and Melissa do every week in educating us about the wonderful opportunities that we have here in this community to promote ourselves, our heritage, our history, which is in abundance, as we all know. The nice thing about El Paso is it's not just any one sector or one area that you can promote or envision as heritage tourism. In El Paso, we have so much to offer, starting from our indigenous culture, our immigrant experience, our Western frontier culture, our Segundo Barrio development as the first settlement here in the city proper. And, you know, we can go on and on and on about our architectural attributes and history that we have, about the art that we have in this community, the mountain that you just saw that nobody else has coming down through the middle of a city, our proximity to Mexico, to southern New Mexico, to far west Texas. I mean, we can just offer a lot of opportunities for developing heritage tourism. And for me, heritage tourism starts with first an appreciation for our culture, regardless of what that culture may be, our background, our experience in developing in this community. And what's beautiful about El Paso is that we, unlike other communities, embrace one another. Yes, there's been issues over our history, as we all know, but El Paso is also the first in many areas, the first to desegregate public housing, the first to promote the importance of UTEP and many other areas that we could go on about. So, Jackson, I have to tell you that when we talk about promoting heritage tourism, I don't think there's another community in this country, in this nation, that has as much to offer as we do here at the crossroads of the North American continent. And I am very proud to be a part of this effort. I want you to know that as long as I'm your senator, I will continue supporting heritage tourism, our history, and the development of it, because it's not only important for our children and future generations, but it also, as we know, creates jobs. It's a good economic development tool, and we all deserve to partake in the benefits of what we naturally have to offer in El Paso. So that's my view on it.
Senator, we thank you for that.
Thank you.
Also, I think we also should go ahead and just state that one of the problems with El Paso history is that there's so much of it. It is so intertwined with each other. It's so overlaid. It's kind of hard to define what it is. I mean, look at this montage of the artwork behind us here. That's just, am I sitting with Pancho Villa in this camera shot?
Yes, you are.
But, and that's nothing directly political. It just happened that way. But this is an idea of a conglomerate, if you will, of El Paso history.
I guess you could, I can't think of another word right now, but, and it's important, I guess, like he was saying, there's so many things, you're educating people, excuse me, let me get a little closer, you're educating people, you're making our own community find its own personal pride. And I think that's what's been lacking in this town for a long, long time. And I'm so glad to see the people here, because I know you're going to be ambassadors and you're going to be going back out and sharing this with people that you know.
Well, let's go now to the city, if you don't mind. City Rep. Acosta, thank you for being here. Good morning, or good afternoon, as the case may be.
Well, good afternoon. And thank you for inviting me to be here, Mr. Polk and Mrs. Sargent. Thank you so much. Barney, thank you for always promoting history in El Paso, and for your, what is it, Six Guns and Shady Ladies. I love to see that. I really do. I think that is awesome.
Yeah, got a space for you.
It is something that actually, I mean, we had in our history was, the cowboys and all the elements that went with it. We as a city council, we promoted the summit. We believe it's important. We have a lot of history in El Paso. And last night, I was reading and I was thinking, what am I going to say? Which area am I going to talk about? Because there is so much. And so we have the oldest missions in the country. We have the largest state park. We have so much history in El Paso. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit about, my alma mater, where I went to high school. And I went to high school at El Paso High School. And that was built in 1916. It was the first high school in El Paso. And it also houses a 4-story building built with a Roman architect, and it has the first stadium ever built in the country that was built with concrete. Now, the fascinating thing about El Paso High School, there's a series of tunnels that are underneath the building. And no one really knows why they were there. But, I thought about it. I said, we have the most beautiful school that I believe, the oldest school in El Paso, unique architecture. If you go to Scenic Mountain, you can see it. I mean, you see it just there next to the mountain. But we're not promoting it. We're not promoting it as history. We're not promoting the tunnels that were underneath. And I thought about it, and I said, well, it's okay for the city council to say, we're going to support the summit. But I think we need to go above and beyond that. There seems to be a disconnect in our city, in our community, in our county, where we're not actually getting people together, the different entities. Obviously, El Paso High School is part of EPISD, El Paso Independent School District. But how we reached out to them, who is reaching out to them and saying, we want to promote it as history? Who is reaching out to the diocese and saying, we want to promote the missions? Who is reaching out, to all these other areas that we have? And I think there's a disconnect. I think, Barney, you're doing a great job, but I think you need more support, and I think you need more, and he has thumbs up. I think we as a community, we as legislators need to ensure that these people are communicating, that the different government entities communicate with each other, and that we promote the history in El Paso. We have visitors go to Tombstone, Arizona, 40 miles off the highway, and you have flocks of people going there. Well, why don't we have flocks of people coming to El Paso? Because we have so much more history than just Tombstone. And again, this is something, as the senator has indicated, It means jobs in El Paso. It means we promote our tourism. It creates jobs in El Paso. And it's actually, we're promoting ourselves, we're putting ourselves on the map. I think we need to do more. We need to have more of these summits throughout the county, probably throughout the region. But I think we are rich in history, we are rich in culture, and as Senator Rodriguez has also indicated, we were the first in many instances, to promote status issues, such as desegregation. That was one of the first things that happened here in El Paso. And again, we have so much history. I normally talk about Alameda, and I normally talk about the Mission Trail, but I think I'm going to leave that to my colleague, Commissioner Perez. But I do want to say, my father had many businesses on Alameda, and one of the things that I had asked him one time was, there was a part of Alameda had black tile on it. And I always asked him, I said, why do they have the black tile, Dad? And he says, because that's where the black people can have businesses. And so there was a time in our history when we had segregation. And so we don't want to lose that. We want to say, you know what, we had this, but we went beyond that. We desegregated our community. But this is still part of our history, and it's still there. There's still parts of Alameda that have black history, that have tile that is black, and that's what it meant. But if we don't promote it, then our own culture and our own citizens will not remember that, will not know that, because as generations continue, they need to know the culture, they need to know where they came from, and they need to know how important El Paso is and how important they were in issues and in the history. And so again, with that, Barney, I promise you, and I will make every effort to make sure that all these entities get together, that we promote the history, whether it's the diocese, the missions, whether it's the school districts, whichever government area it is, that we do that promotion, because I think El Paso deserves it, and I think you, the community, deserve it. Thank you very much.
Acosta, thank you very much. Well, also, Emma, you mentioned, we'll get to ask Commissioner Perez in a moment, but you mentioned also El Paso High School being a building that was built by Henry Trost. It's coming up on 100 years, and that's going to be an interesting thing. But we'll alert the control room here. We're going to play a clip in a few minutes called Trost Train. And we had some visitors to El Paso a while back in January, and it was very interesting to hear what they had to say. But first, let's talk to County Commissioner Vince Perez. Sir.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation and for having me here. Thank you to all the organizers. It's such a great event. That's grown from last year, and so I'm very glad to see it progress, and I hope that trend continues. Some of my thoughts, usually when I'm asked to speak about history, it's usually to little kids, so it's a lot less intimidating.
We're not that much different.
We're all little kids, same. Look
we're just older.
And they don't notice, but
look at these right here.
You guys are all history buffs, so if I get something wrong, it's a lot more pressure. But if I can, I guess I'll just offer just some thoughts on heritage tourism. Before I had the opportunity to serve as county commissioner, I had the opportunity to live in Washington, D.C. For 10 years. I went there as an undergrad and then also had the privilege of working for our former congressman. And the thing about D.C. is that you feel the history everywhere you go. When I was in college, there was an old building there. It was the original building to Georgetown. And George Washington spoke there at the steps of this building. And there was just something about that feeling of, wow, I'm standing where George Washington stood. When I was then working on Capitol Hill, I lived 5 blocks away from the Supreme Court. And even though it would be faster for me to go down Pennsylvania and go straight to the office, I always wanted to go down past the Supreme Court so I could see the Capitol every day. And it's just, just kind of the awe of all the decisions and all the things that have taken place in these buildings. And I tried to imagine what the Capitol looked like, during the Civil War when they were building the dome. So you can really feel the history, and I think that's really what makes places like Washington successful and a popular tourist attraction. Obviously, we can't compete, with places like Washington, but we have, as everybody's heard, a great amount of history that's very unique. And I think where we need some help, and I think where we all have to come together is, how do we tell that story in a way where people feel that connection, that something really special happened here? I talk a lot about the Mission Trail, and it's one of our greatest assets. But Don Juan de Oñate came here in 1598, and that was 22 years before the Pilgrims landed at Plymouth. And yet we don't really think about the significance of that. This happened 22 years before the Pilgrims landed at Plymouth. It's about 200 years before the Constitution took effect. What happened here in our community is really the story of the American Southwest and the founding of the American Southwest. In some of the notes that I had here, I was thinking about Jamestown. Jamestown was founded about a decade after the events that took place in San Elizario when Don Juan de Oñate first came here. A decade after. And yet for their 400th celebration, Queen Elizabeth came to join them in the celebration. It's part of the community's fabric where everybody feels that connection. And to me, that's really the essence of heritage tourism. And I think the challenge for us that's going to require some further thought is when we look at our missions, people pass by them every day. And my biggest concern is I don't think they really give a thought about the significance of what's taken place in those facilities, in those buildings, or the significance of the area of San Elizario and the historical significance and really the true meaning. Now, you guys know the significance of it. Guys like Alborego here know the significance of it, and Vince Sanchez and all, Bernie Sargent, you all know the significance of it. But I feel that most El Pasoans, they don't feel that. And I think we as policymakers, and as stakeholders in the community, how do we get that? How do we get people, El Pasoans, to embrace our history, to really recognize that significance so it becomes part of our community's fabric? So that way, just like it is in Jamestown, just like it is in Washington, D.C., we feel that same connection to our history, and then we become promoters of it.
Commissioner, thank you very much.
Thank you, yes.
I got to tell you a story. I also know a bit about Washington, D.C. I know two cities in America fairly well, El Paso and Washington, D.C. Don't send me to Detroit, ever. I just don't know the layout. But no, the point is about Washington, D.C. is very historic. It's had so much go on there. And yet El Paso has had some similar, I think, historical significant things in the world stage years before them. Because Washington, D.C. was made up on the banks of a couple of farms. And yet it's now a major location for tourism, etc. El Paso is a place that has had so many different things go on that it's kind of, like I said earlier, it's kind of hard to figure out which one to focus on. But if you start with the Mission Trail and the Oñate Expedition, everything else sort of came from that. So if we were to promote the Mission Trail like Sheldon Hall did, you will find that you're treating the original story of the El Paso Juarez Valley. And that's something I think we need to take account of, because it wasn't just one side of the river that we need to talk about. The valley, the whole valley, is very significant. And it was the Oñate Expedition that began all that, bringing in the church, etc. Another thought, let's play a couple of tapes here. We're going to also give you a rundown on who came in first, second, or third. Actually, we go down to 11. The voting today was interesting, because here are the voting tabulations. Melissa's going to read the actual winners, but they went to a lot of trouble to figure out who did what. We asked people to have a green dot for their first preference, and then the rest of the dots for the second through 5 preferences, and we got some interesting results.
The first one was downtown buildings. Number 2, Old Town tourism. Number 3, missions. Number 4, Native Americans. Number 5, U.S. military. Number 6, the Salt Wars. Number 7, railroads. Number 8, Carta, or the Camino Real Tierra Adentro. Neighborhoods is number 9. Asarco is number 10. And 11, which was others, was Waco Tanks, UNESCO, and theme parks.
Theme parks, indeed. Well, let's do this. We have a clip that we want to play to you now about downtown buildings. The buildings in downtown are many of them historic. Not all of them, but many of them. An architect, about 100 and some odd years ago, came to town and decided that this was a great place to create things. And El Paso became his sort of like palette of various colors and various hues of architecture. So let's take a look now about some tourists who came to El Paso in January of this year and what they thought about El Paso.
So, we came to El Paso to sort of see El Paso's architecture and experience the historic zeitgeist of this city. And I think that everybody who came, and I included, were really just overwhelmed, 1, by the incredible hospitality, but 2, the remarkable architectural and cultural treasures that you have here.
That thing is one of Trost's masterpieces. I'm talking about the O.T. Bassett Tower. The O.T. Bassett Tower designed by Trost, one of his last buildings, 1929 to 1930. Mistakenly often called Art Deco. It's not exactly Art Deco. More precisely, I would call this a Gothic building. It's exactly like the Woolworth building in New York City, built by Cass Gilbert in 1911. It's the same style, where you have these incredibly powerful vertical lines. It's got a vertical thrust skyward with Gothic details in the upper portion of the building. You can see that there's dark Italian marble inlaid into the upper parts of the building, along with a pink marble which comes from Verona in northern Italy. This brickwork is very, very high quality. This is a very expensive building, the Bassett Tower, and it was constructed by a guy by the name of Charles N. Bassett in honor of his father, O.T. Bassett.
El Paso is a series of historical narratives that come together in a beautiful confluence, whether it's the revolutionaries or Henry Trost, today's future, all of the things, sort of all these different narratives swirling together to tell the amazing story of the American Southwest. And it really is very inspiring, and I know for our group, to be able to come here and look at your successes and look at things that haven't been quite as successful, and to look at the possibility and the potential has just been such a treat and such an opportunity for us to take something home and hopefully take these ideas and invest them into our own community.
That gentleman came here with 50 people from Tucson, Arizona. They charged them about $1,300 a piece. They had a waiting list to get on the train to come here for this tour. And when they got here, Max Grossman and Bernie and a few other people showed them around El Paso. They were flabbergasted that we had such great history standing here because theirs was torn down about 35 years ago. They had Trost buildings in Arizona. Bernie, come up and tell us some of your thoughts about this, because I know you're directly involved. Bernie Sargent is chair of the El Paso County Historical Commission, gets into a lot of the history that we do here. And your thoughts on this one, Bernie, because they showed up and they were tourists.
Yeah, they were tourists, and it's a great example of what the maintenance, preservation, restoration of these buildings can mean to us. We're really blessed that we have a climate that is dry as opposed to the climates they have in Houston and other areas. Otherwise, these buildings would have been gone a long, long time ago. And yet that's kind of a double-edged sword, because there's a propensity by some to make room for the new by removing the old. And if you'd had the opportunity to listen to Mark Wolf, the executive director of the Texas Historical Commission earlier today, he gave some great numbers on the fallacy of tearing down and rebuilding as opposed to renovation. Wonderful information, and I'm going to share that with every single elected official in this town till they actually read it and understand what that could mean for us. Because
these guys got the memo here.
They got the memo.
They got the memo.
Looks like you both got the same email with a blue on there too.
Yeah, that's right.
But it's a phenomenal opportunity for El Pasoans to share El Paso's heritage, and it's here. We don't have to rebuild. You talk to any major tourist organization around the world, and they will tell you, you build on what you have. You don't reinvent under the auspices that you wanted somebody to see something you like, as opposed to what you have as a social heritage fabric.
There's a lot of tourism that could be had in El Paso, and I think that's what the senator picked up on when you created this Heritage Tourism Committee that you have. Tell us, if you don't mind, why you did that, because I think you mentioned San Antonio as a comparison.
Well, you know, I have to credit some staff members and my own wife for suggesting that particular advisory committee. I have advisory committees on healthcare, on education, on veterans, on environment, renewable energy, and Carmen Rodriguez, my wife, thought that we obviously should have something on jobs and economic development. And the more we talked about jobs, and also we got into the discussions about what El Paso has to offer to create jobs, we realized that heritage tourism is an area that has been, as Ms. Acosta pointed out, essentially overlooked by our governmental entities, by the different groups that are espousing one facet of our heritage or culture over another, and that there seemed to be a fractious kind of environment when it comes to promoting heritage tourism. And so the idea was, why don't we create an advisory committee of individuals from the community who are interested, who are knowledgeable, and care about preserving our history and our heritage and promoting it for purposes of creating jobs and stimulating economic development. And so that's how that particular advisory committee grew and developed, and is now one of the more active of the advisory committees that I have in Senate District 29. Now, I think we have to be honest with ourselves, and I think Ms. Acosta alluded to the fact that we have not been essentially together on this issue. Maybe in Tucson, maybe in Santa Fe, and some of these other places, whoever it was that was in charge there knew what to do and focused on that in order to get to where they are with their particular heritage and their tourism. We've been working sometimes at odds with one another, and the idea behind the committee was not only to promote it, but to see if we could help bring people together, everybody, whether it's a county, the city, the state. You know, I've had plenty of meetings with Carter Smith, the head of Texas Parks and Wildlife, for example, to promote developing a visitor center at the Franklin Mountain State Park. We don't have one. We're one of the only state parks in the state that doesn't have a visitor center. And for that matter, we don't have a visitor center over in Waco Tanks, you know. So why is that important? Well, you know, tourists, people who want to go to a particular site because they're interested in its history and the surrounding heritage and culture in that particular site, want to have a place to go to. And visitor centers, as you know, those of you who've gone to other heritage tourism locations, are places where you get information, places where there's a little amphitheater to provide, you know, classes or instruction to kids that come by. And so we have a lot of work to do at the state level and at the local level to, as we're doing here, to come together and promote what we have and that's natural to us, to our region. You know, you mentioned Pancho Villa a little earlier, Jackson, and the Mexican Revolution is a tremendous value, I believe, to our region here. Why? Because here's where the Mexican Revolution was actually plotted out by President Madero.
It was planned here.
And Pancho Villa. Los de Abajo, the most prominent literary piece coming out of the Mexican Revolution, was written right here in El Paso. And we could go on and on about that particular history that is of interest to a lot of folks, but we've got so many other things that we have to offer. So
let me do this. We have a number of video clips, and we have one coming up now on the Mexican Revolution that we're going to play. And the idea of El Paso history being so multi-layered, what I've done as a TV producer, I've done my best to go through the layers and do one layer at a time, which is kind of hard to do because they're intertwined. And yet when you get to Pancho Villa, the Mexican Revolution, you fold in a Sarco because he worked there. And then if you're going to fold in a Sarco, then you're going to fold in Mount Cristo Rey. And so all of it just keeps going all the way across the county until you got one big picture. But let's take a look now, if the control room's ready, let's take a look now at the Mexican Revolution video that we have a clip of.
Fred, we're on the northwest corner of Mesa and Texas Street, and this used to be an ice cream parlor. And one of the unique things about Pancho Villa was that he loved ice cream. So why was he here? Who was he with? And what happened?
Pancho Villa was known to have a sweet tooth. And one thing that he enjoyed was chocolate-covered baseball ice creams. And the Elite Confectionery, inaugurated here in March of 1911, offered that to Villa and a lot of followers of Francisco Madero. In this photograph, we can witness Pascual Orozco right here and Francisco Villa.
And those guys had a great time eating baseball ice cream. I don't even know what that is. But if we could look in the history books and figure out what that was, I bet they could sell it in downtown El Paso as an historic ice cream event. But to the idea, Senator, you're correct. The Mexican Revolution was planned in El Paso. A great bit of it was equipped in El Paso. The El Paso businessmen made a whole lot of money off of selling guns and off of selling weapons, uniforms, supplies, ammunition. In fact, a load of ammunition sort of got Columbus, New Mexico in trouble Remember that one, Bernie? Come tell us that story if you don't mind, because Columbus, New Mexico was raided by Pancho Villa. He was upset with a guy who had sold him some, bad ammo?
Well, there's a difference of opinion, either bad ammo or no ammo at all, but the bottom line was he showed up in Columbus because he figured that was the best place to make an impact on this part of the world, and that is to cross the border and stage an attack. It certainly got everybody's attention. Didn't really work in his benefit, though, because then we ended up having this gentleman right here, Blackjack Pershing, chasing him down into Mexico. So it kind of backfired on him, but he thought he got the point across.
We went from hero to villain very quickly.
And this, of course, was when he was a hero. He was having a good time in El Paso, hanging out with the general,
Playing
smiling.
cards.
Everybody's having a great
Camino
time.
Real.
Come over for a party. 2 years later, the party's over.
They played poker at the Camino Real, places.
Yeah. I mean, so this is a very historic group of people doing things like that here.
And the good thing is with organizations like the El Paso County Historical Commission, you saw the plaque that was up on the wall that they were discussing. They actually, the picture is etched into that metal. Am I correct, dear? Yeah. I think part of our problem with our history is we don't have enough visual history left. A lot of it's gone. And plaques like this do help people get the idea. Here you've got Pancho Villa sitting there enjoying his ice cream. You wouldn't have seen that. How do you describe that?
Well, what we might do at some point, might be interesting to somebody recreate that confectionery. You can't do it on that spot. That's a different building now. Go ahead, tell us.
That's now become the CVS drugstore, and I have to give CVS out of Houston, Texas, a big shout because they went in and they redid the whole building internally, but the outside looks an awful lot like it did back in the early 1900s when Pancho used to eat his ice cream and get fat.
It's a beautiful store. It really is.
It is really pretty inside.
And we at the El Paso History Radio show stand on the shoulders of giants. There was 2 of them in that clip.
That's right.
One's still around. Fred, are you in the room? Fred Morales is part of a huge part of El Paso's history. Leon Metz, of course. Leon has retired from the radio program, but we are continuing in the tradition. And actually, we're finding it pretty easy since they cleared the way for us.
That's right.
But we're also now seeing a lot of people wanting to know more. And that's one reason why we've attempted and are trying every day to embrace the technology. We've got quite a bit of it in the room here. They don't always work on the live TV show, but after a while, the DVDs always work.
And you've got your rankings here, and this tells you right away what are important to us and what obviously I would say a lot of people do when they have family come in. These are the items they talk to their family or their visitors, out-of-town visitors, and we have business people come in. I just turn the call, leave them with Bernie for about an hour, and they're because he talks about all the history. He's an encyclopedia. But these rankings, this is what we need for a visual. This is what we need to do. We need to have people be able to come and see and touch. It may not be the real thing. We may be able to rebuild something that looked like Ponce's Rancho. We've got the replica fort out at Fort Bliss, an old West town. I mean, it could all be combined in an area, but I think this is what they're trying to tell us they want us to do.
Well, when they mention the old West town on there, the interesting thing about Tombstone is they have 30 seconds of history. We've got 30 years. People go 40 miles one way off the interstate to get to it, and they will get in between 3 and 6 million people a year just to walk down Old Ellen Street and see what it looked like until a bunch of New York investors bought it.
Well, they still do.
Up, didn't they?
Yeah, in fact, they went in and they painted all the buildings real pretty colors, and then the National Park Service came in and said, you're no longer historic. We're taking away all the designations unless you return it back to the original colors.
Any comments from our panel here? Because that kind of history is here and available. Emma, yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you. I believe that history is so important in El Paso. But, as you talk to constituents, many of them do not know the history of El Paso. And so I was just talking to their senator right now, and I said, Senator, I think what we need is to mandate that every school in the El Paso district, El Paso County, teach a class in local history. They teach overall history, but they don't teach local history.
Hey.
Yeah. Start young.
And I think that's something that we're missing. We're missing because, as I said, as generations move up, and generations are gone, then the only thing we have left is a history. But you have to know the history. And I think Commissioner Perez indicated that when he lived in Washington, it seemed to be like cultural. Everyone knew all the history. Well, we're missing that link. And I think part of that is that we need to teach our youngsters from pre-K to kindergarten to 1st through 12th grade local history classes, so that they know what happened in El Paso, so that they know what Trost did in El Paso and all the buildings that he did, including El Paso High, so that we know how Azcárate got its name. It was the first land grant provided to a family named Azcárate, and they got 900 acres to build on it. It became the town of Azcárate. They were the first ones in that area that had a mission, the Misión de San Lorenzo. And then after it flooded, they rebuilt, and it was the Franciscan fathers that did it. They rebuilt it, and then it flooded again, and they rebuilt it again. And the third time they said, we're moving.
They got the idea by then,
They got
didn't
the
they?
idea,
Yeah,
okay?
yeah.
Take a hint.
But what they did, and you have to visualize that in that time, there were no streets. There was no, the river flowed openly. And so they decided to move it on the other side of the river. So what happened? It is now located in Juarez, Mexico. Oh, yeah. You know, so these are things that our normal everyday child or kids in school, they don't know. I researched the area because I think that we have I love to research history. I think we have a lot of culture, and we need to know where we came from. You know, I have a park in the Lower Valley that's called Cowboy Park. And I asked, well, now it's called Hidden Valley Park. And everybody calls it as Cowboy Park. And I said, well, why do they call it Cowboy Park? So we researched. I have a friend named Lori Cooper, and she does a lot of research. She says, well, because it was the first polo field in El Paso County. I said, wow, really? She says, yes. Before even Alameda became a highway, it was the first polo field in El Paso County, and she found pictures of what it looked like back then. And again, you know, even the residents in the area don't know why it was called Cowboy Park. Well, it's part of our history. It's called Cowboy Park, so that's where the cowboys went to play polo. You know, these are things that we don't know, things that can only be taught probably in a classroom. Azcárate Park, it was a man-made lake, and around the lake was a racing field. It was one of the first ones in the entire Southwest. Of course, it's gone now, but this is history. And how do you teach history? You have to teach it at a young level, just like we did with recycling when recycling first started, and you start teaching the young kids. And after a while, they know it and they learn it. So we're missing that element. And I, for one, am going to promote that. I'm going to go back to the city and I'm going to say, you know, we need to pass legislation and ask our state delegation to pass legislation to teach local history classes throughout El Paso County. So thank you very much.
Ms. Acosta, if I can add to that, is one thing that I came from a very poor neighborhood in California. My parents couldn't afford to go a lot of places. But where I did get exposed to history, museums, everything else was field trips. And so kids do not get out of their schools. And yes, it's good. We need to teach them in their classroom, but we need to get them out to the McGoffin home. We get them at Concordia. And these kids raise the money to go on these field trips themselves. And while they're at Concordia, I get to teach them a little bit about El Paso history as a whole, because Concordia Cemetery is also a history book about El Paso. Mm-hmm. And getting them there, they're all like, wow, I didn't know that was there. And they go back and they tell their parents. Because I'll see these kids a couple of times back in different trips. Oh, my mom and dad are going to volunteer and come this time. So, you know, that's what we're trying to do.
I agree with you. And I think along with teaching that history class, that there's a requirement of field trips in there. Yeah. So that these kids can actually go and observe the history that we still have here in El Paso.
We have a major teaching moment available every day at a place called the McGoffin Home. It is a classroom unto itself of history, and its history is amazing. We just happen to have a video clip of the McGoffin home. Mm-hmm. So let's take this moment now and take a look at that clip.
This is El Paso's McGoffin home, where two countries meet and two cultures combine.
Buenas tardes, good afternoon. Don Tito, Señora Ariola.
Buenas tardes.
Buenas tardes.
El Paso in the 1890s. This dignified adobe hacienda is the region's social center. A who's who of Texas and Mexico gather for parties and politics at the home of Joseph and Octavia McGoffin. A few years earlier, El Paso was a sleepy frontier settlement, but all that changed when the first of 5 railroads arrived in 1881, bringing more people, better products, and a new level of sophistication to the booming border city. By the 1890s, El Paso was a center of trade and commerce for the Great Southwest. And no family was more prominent than the McGoffins. They entertained several times a month, always in grand Victorian style. Their guests were influential people from throughout the region, greeted by the McGoffins in the home's Great Hall.
It was a great hall. Let me tell you, that was a great event. And yes, it's self-promotion, but you got to understand something like the Shady Ladies and Bernie. we
Six
have
Guns and Shady Ladies,
that's
please.
What it really is. We have basically all kind of tied our future to the history of El Paso because we get a kick out of it. The fact that we promote ourselves and the history at the same time, we got no choice because I mean we're the ones doing it. That was a video that was exceptional in its origin. I don't think he could get that to happen again. But that was a state park at the time. And we basically took it over and had a great time.
Yeah, I mean, we recreated a meal of the engagement party.
It was an exact menu.
Exact menu, the lamb, the whole thing. And it was amazing to be able to open that table. And
Isabel, whose wedding was that?
My cousin was my great-grandfather.
Your cousin was your great-grandfather? No, Bernie, get back. Oh, okay. Sorry about that. I'm supposed to... I'm running down here.
She's a relative of
what
the
we have here,
McGoffin
Isabel
family.
Glasgow is with us here this afternoon. And just tell us who those people were.
It took almost 30 years, and I want to thank the Texas Historical Commission for redoing our McGoffin home. I lived there as a little girl, and then in 1972. But I have another house that I'm here representing, and that is Hart's Mill. My mother's great-grandfather was Simeon Hart, but I don't have another 30 years to get it up and going. So if anybody is interested in Hart's Mill,
Yes.
Mr. Rodriguez is very interested in it, and Gary Williams at the Community Foundation is too. So thank you for the self-aggrandizement as they were talking.
Isabel, thank you very much.
She's living history.
Yeah, it was Joseph and Octavia McGoffin's daughter. That was her engagement party. Josephine McGoffin,
Josephine. And what we had the opportunity to do is to do reenactments and recreate El Paso history. And if we get a chance, we're going to do a lot of TV like this. Is a cost to it.
Well,
that broke the bank for me that day, but we did it.
You know, Jackson, I don't know if you have a clip on Waco tanks.
We might.
I hope you do because if we talk about, as you just said, and you're right, about the story that we have to tell, and we mentioned Juan Oñate coming over, in 1598, and then the development of Hart's Mill.
Well, he crossed there. That's where he crossed.
But before all of that, we had the Tiwas, the Kiowas, the Comanches, we had the Apaches, the Mescaleros in particular, even Pueblo and Navajo influences in Waco Tanks. Why? Because Waco Tanks is a place that has what?
Water.
Water. And we are in a desert region. And so it's no accident that people were naturally attracted to Waco Tanks. Our U.S. Cavalry, the Butterfield Stagecoach, the people who came to do the survey for the railroad that transformed El Paso in the 1800s, it all began out there in Waco Tanks. And so you look at the history in terms of the history line, and so we say, well, okay, Oñate, crossed, it's over 400 years now, but we're talking about 10,000 years. We're talking about 10,000 years of history originating in that site. And if you go over there and you see in the walls the names of people who have carved their names in there, you will run into, for example, Coopers. Well, who were the Coopers? Well, the Coopers were from the area down there in the lower valley, San Elizario, Socorro, that were very active and that used Waco tanks, like a lot of other people, to access water and to be able to plan the future development of our region. And so the cavalry, I mean, you'll see everything right there. So I hope that when we develop the trajectory of the history in the region, we start with the prehistoric, because we have that. Nobody else can claim to have that, but we do.
Senator, there's also a very large group of people who were living at one time at a place called Keystone on the west
Yes,
side.
absolutely.
That is an ancient site that has
That's
been
another
discovered.
ancient site. That's
Take a look
right.
at it.
That's
well,
right.
let's do this. Let's ask Vincent Perez, if you don't mind, your comments, because we missed you on the last round here. What are your thoughts at this point?
You know, I think the educational component is certainly critical. You know, not only at a young age, it kind of speaks to that gap where I feel that, you know, we as El Pasoans need to feel the connection to our past. You know, whether it be Waco Tanks, whether it be the Mission Trail, or all these other sites, we need to feel that that connection. You know, unfortunately, we didn't, growing to school, I didn't have a local class, and it wasn't until I became an elected official that I really started studying the history of my district and where I became more interested in it. You know, I think we as elected officials, those of us who are charged with ultimately making the decisions that on things like heritage tourism, how much money are we going to allocate for heritage tourism? We also need to educate ourselves on all the assets. You know, I try to study up on as much as I can on various policy issues, and in addition to all the history items, we have other policy tasks. But you know, there's a great program here in El Paso called Leadership El Paso, and it's an institute every year where they select a class of about 30 or so, and it's on various leadership skills, and they develop leadership skills, and they focus on take you to different things. But you know what would be great is if there were some sort of similar program for, you know, not only elected officials but stakeholders and other leaders who are interested to, perhaps it could be a couple months, a year, where there's sort of a historical institute or some sort of program where people can truly understand, you know, a broad spectrum of El Paso's history.
Like an orientation program.
Sure, because ultimately, as elected officials, and I'll admit, like I said, my knowledge of history is very, very limited, and it's limited to my district. You know, I'm not as familiar with all the great history that we have downtown. But I think when all of us sort of have that common bond and all of us realize the importance of that, then I think you start to make better policy. You get to start better ideas, you know, that really move forward. And then I think that'll create a synergy for more cohesiveness, more cooperation between the various levels of government. Because I think right now that's what's lacking. I think a lot of people, and like I said, I'll put myself in there, we don't realize what it is that we have, and we don't realize really what's the first step that we should take to promote, you know, a particular area. What investments should we make?
I'm glad you asked that. I have an idea.
Yes.
May I say so? I mean, seriously, obviously I'm into television technology, and everybody who is growing up these days, a child of any group, they have something they can look at, an electronic device. They're learning from that. And whatever they're learning is what's in it. What I'd like El Paso to do, and it's self-serving in the sense that I'm a TV producer and I'm going to recommend TV. But it's an obvious choice. Television is where we're at these days. You learn through TV, even if it's a little screen, a big screen, whatever. The medium of television is where people are now learning a lot of what they do. We have two proposals that we put forth to the city, and we're about to hit the county with it. The idea is to put some small TV shows together that can be accessed in downtown El Paso at the various kiosks. When you go as a tourist, you go in this spot and say, what happened on this spot? And you'll find history in layers. We can produce that on TV and put that in there. Another one is a larger TV series. All these topics here, a total of maybe 25 of them. Put that together, put it on the internet, put it online, put it in the new digital wall that's coming to El Paso at the History Museum, and sort of have us define what is our history. Because if you've noticed, if you wait for the national news to come tell your story, they don't tell the story you want to hear. They tell the story they want to hear, or we have a better story than that. And that's the whole point. Speaking of which, on television, the Waco Tanks experience that I had producing a video out there, it transformed me. Because I didn't know a lot about Waco Tanks till I got into it, and I found out one major thing about Waco Tanks that most people do not know. Let's play a clip of that right now, and you'll see if you can understand what I'm talking about, and I'll tell you what that major point is after the video. Here it comes.
This is one of the most unusual places on Earth. These rocks rise more than 400 feet out of a flat desert floor and extend thousands of feet down into bedrock. This is a place where the desert keeps its water, where early people hid secrets for all to find. Where conquistadors and cowboys found an oasis. And wagon trains crossed paths with Indian tribes. For modern Native Americans, it is a sacred place, a gift from nature. For hikers and climbers from all over the world who come here to test their skills, it is an outdoor paradise. For scientists, it's home to species found nowhere else on Earth. And for the state of Texas, this small mountain range, with its rich natural and cultural history, is a treasure to preserve. This world-class wonder in far west Texas is El Paso's Waco Tanks.
That's actually the opening segment to that video. It goes on to explain quite a bit about the history of Waco Tanks. And as I guess you call me a gringo, as a gringo going out there to figure out what the history was, I've been called worse, but that's a common term. I didn't really understand the history that was there. And I'll tell you something, Senator, what I learned, the most amazing fact that I learned from people like Alex Metis and others who were instructors out there at the time, the major fact that the Native Americans have out there that they don't want it disturbed, it's a burial ground.
Yes.
And most people don't know that. There's many, many Native Americans buried throughout Waco Tanks. So you wonder why they get upset when you land on the rocks. There's a sacredness to that place that is very, very real.
And you know what, Jackson, you're absolutely right about that. And I think one thing we can say about that place and many other places here in El Paso, but especially about that place, is that Commissioner Perez was talking earlier about the monuments in Washington and the history that's there. And like you and him, I also spent 7 years in Washington. I went to law school up there at George Washington. And you know, you visit all of those, the Jefferson Memorial, the Lincoln Memorial and all that. Those are monuments that have been built up, and of course we learned through history as kids who they were. Now, in our case, you talk about Waco Tanks. The distinction for me is that we have a living, breathing history in this area. Why? Because you still have relatives. You still have people connected, as you are with the McGoffin home, for example, to that place, and that can still relate what happened to their forebears in that place, what role they played in the development of our region and our history. Now, you can't find that in D.C. You can't find someone like you that says, in one of those monuments, that says, you know, my grandpa was here. And so the same thing applies to Waco Tanks. And so I definitely would invite people, as you've discovered in terms of the history of that place, how significant it is for our region and why we need to start looking at its value, I'm going to use that word, to all of us to preserve and maintain. I have nothing against rock climbing, but I have to tell you, having been there, my view is that the balance has tipped too far towards developing that particular part of the tourism as at the expense of the value of the location for the continued education of our children, Emma, to take them on field trips, to learn about the history in the place and why it's important, what it means to Native Americans, and what it should mean for us as well. That's one of the dialogues that I'm engaging in with the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department, that you know, we have to strike a balance in terms of what we do with our natural environment and the attractions that we have in this place. You mentioned Hart's Mill. More recently, our Congressman Beto O'Rourke and I participated with him in the effort try to convince the federal government not to extend the portion of the wall along the border there that would kind of take up that whole area where Hart's Mill is because of the significance of that location for us. The federal government went forward with their plans anyway, but it's an example of why we have to come together and work to protect and preserve the treasures that we have in our whole region. And there's a lot of them.
Absolutely. Well, you mentioned something interesting, Senator. You mentioned that you and Commissioner Perez, myself, a lot of us have gone to Washington, D.C. We all got out of there. We're here for a reason.
Yes.
You too.
Yeah,
Bernie, your thoughts?
Yeah, if I could add just a couple things. Jackson, I kid Jackson about his selfless promotion, but honestly, it means a lot to El Paso. And I'll give you a little story. A number of years ago, we were working diligently to fight the railroad to save a little piece of property on the west side of town. We knew the importance. We felt it could become something special for El Paso, but a lot of El Pasoans had no knowledge of it, didn't know anything about it. Well, along comes this guy from Washington, D.C., said, yeah, I used to live here, and he said, I do videos. And I said, well, I've heard a lot of things before. I'm from Washington, I'm here to help you. And so
I'm here to help. Yeah.
So what he said to me is, he said, I think you guys need a video to get out to the public, get into the schoolrooms, get out on public broadcasting so that everyone can see what you're trying to accomplish here and what the end result could be. Well, that piece of property became 52 acres we now call Keystone Heritage Park. And a lot of it is due to the video, the outreach. In fact, to tie that directly to the impact of that video, we've gotten a lot of contributions. We've gathered more than $6 million in donations, grants, and elbow grease to get where we're at there in the 17 years we've worked on Keystone Park. But the contribution, the donation that I think means the most to me to this day was a number of years ago, right after the video showed for the second time on TV, I got a letter. Actually, 2 letters. One was handwritten by an adult, the other one by a child. I could tell the difference because a child's was much easier to read. And in it, there was a story. And what it was is the little girl, I believe she was about 6 years old, had watched the video, and she said, I want to help Keystone. She goes, Mommy, would you send them my piggy bank? So Mom counted the money. It was $4.72, and she wrote me a check for $4.72. So the impact that video had on the youth of El Paso means a heck of a lot to me. Now, on another story very quickly now, because I know we're getting short on time, a couple years ago, Day Tripper came through here. It's a group of people from England, and they travel around the world. They put on these little 30-minute dissertations about communities. And they did one out at Waco Tanks, and they asked me if I would help out a little bit, and I thought, yeah, I'm a self-promoter. So I said, yeah, I'll ride on the stagecoach, and I'll talk to the people on TV, and we'll have some fun with it. I have heard from people all over the place. I mean, we're talking about in Europe, all over the East Coast. Hey, I think I saw you on TV, didn't I? And I was more impressed that they saw the actual show than me. But I thought, this is great. It's an outreach that we really need to examine and express ourselves and pursue.
I don't see how you're going to do promotion of El Paso without television. I mean,
Yeah.
I live in it.
It's that visual.
You
Yeah.
take a look at it. Also, speaking of which, we have another. If there's a comment or two, y'all pipe up here quick. And then also, we're going to take questions. If you have something, raise your hand, and you have to come up in front of the cameras. But one other clip I want to play for you that we actually have 2 more clips. But this is one going back to the Old West history. And our Old West, what was the total on the Old West history?
That was.
Let me get the piece of paper over here
That's
again.
right, yes, it's
Old
right
West
there.
was up near the top.
It was
Old Town Tourism.
Old Town Tourism, number 2.
All right, we have a clip now of something that's gotten very famous, and this is just part of like the tombstone type history. And this is Gunfights of the Old West. And here is a clip from our video from Gunfights of the Old West.
Boy, I tell you, this is the biggest miscarriage of justice I've ever seen. This is nonsense. This is ridiculous. I tell you what, anybody that stand up for the Mexicans ought to be hung.
George, I hope you ain't talking about me now.
If the shoe fits, wear it.
Turn loose, George. I got him covered. Not my fight. Not my fight. Stay down.
You murdered me, you son of a bitch.
Not my fight. Not my fight. Stand down!
Once you get 6 guns going, you can't stop them.
I got to tell you the history of that video because, frankly, that was done in an old West El Paso town.
Which is no longer
We had
here.
one.
Yes.
And it got cut up and shipped to Cornudas.
Right.
And it just slowly melted in the desert sun out there. But that was a guy, single effort, an individual. He decided to make an old West town. We got our hands on it to do a video, so that was kind of fun.
Yeah, and he used to have melodramas
Yeah,
there.
they had dinner plays in there
Dinner plays,
Friday
yeah.
nights, that kind of thing. The whole thing was really kind of fun. But that's Old West by one individual who pulled it off way out into Montana, and it's gone. So that's the kind of thing that I think people might want to see. Bernie's correct. People look all over the world. And when they hear the El Paso theme, they know what's going on.
Where's the Old West?
Where's the old El Paso theme? It's
Yeah.
around here somewhere. But that's kind of the thoughts that we had on here. We do have one more clip. Do we have time for one more clip? We do, okay. One more clip we're going to play is something that's happened recently, almost a year, about 11 months ago. There was a major event on the west side of town. The smokestacks came down, and we did a video last tour of the El Paso smelter. So let's take a look at that clip. That's our last clip, and we have that to show you now.
It's burned, as you can tell. It's post-toasties.
You're about to go on the last tour of an American industrial giant. For more than 110 years, the smelter in El Paso, Texas, drove the region's economy. But few people ever saw what went on inside. Our cameras were allowed in just before the smelter's demolition began in the summer of 2010.
This building that we are sitting in right now, if it was in operation, we wouldn't dare be sitting here.
Oh, no.
It was so loud, fire would be belching out of the converters, there would be pouring mat over here, the cranes would be running back and forth. The only one that was allowed on this floor was a crane chaser.
Our guides were 2 retired employees. They showed us a view of the smelter that few had seen, and no one will ever see again.
Oh, beautiful.
What do you got here?
You're going to see inside the furnace now. All this here that you see right here, that's blister copper.
Is this one of the furnaces that rotates?
Yes, this is a converter, furnace number 2. And as you can see, there's some accretion built up inside the furnace.
That video is one of what we plan for 2 videos. And whether the debate for the stacks is over, obviously, whatever you think about that, that's gone. But as we look to the future of the site, we're also finding out that there's an awful lot of history that's gone on there that has not been dealt with. There could be a museum on that location. You'll see an exhibit in this hall over here where we're trying to save the administration building, turn that into an interpretive center on site, and put that whole thing as a part of El Paso history in much sharper focus, because you have Cristo Rey there, you have the Smelter Town people there, you have the Asarco place itself there, and you have all kinds of other history that's gone on there prior to the smelter. So that's another thing. What is that?
That's Bernie singing.
What is that? What is that song?
More history.
What is that song?
I've heard that somewhere.
What is that song?
Oh, is it?
You know?
Everybody knows that.
It's coming from under here.
Here's Rosa.
Oh, look who's here!
Rosita.
Just on cue, Rosa Guerrero! Yes. Rosa, come on up. We want to welcome Rosa Guerrero, our favorite icon of El Paso.
Thank you, Jackson.
And I guess it turned out, Rosa, that when you heard the theme, you couldn't resist. Is that it?
That's right.
We thank you for coming in here. Want to come say hello to everybody on the panel, please?
Yes.
They all want to say hi to you.
How are you, sir?
I'm
Good
better
to see
now.
You. Good to see you. How are you, ma'am? ¿Cómo está? God bless you. Good to see you. ¿Qué tal? How are you, Mr. Perez? My love to your family, all of you. ¿Cómo está, Emma? Qué hermosa. Good to see you. Ay, qué hermoso. I just saw your wife out there. Good to see you. Qué hermoso. Siéntese. Siéntese.
Rosa, come in and have a seat.
All righty.
Come in and have a seat.
Yes.
We thought we would introduce Rosa just a little bit early because Rosa is the next event in this room where she is going to help us understand the history of dance in the Americas. We have about 5 minutes. If anybody has any questions from the front couple of rows, if you'd like to ask our panel, or if our panel has any more thoughts, because I have a feeling this panel probably has a few more thoughts.
We always have thoughts.
Come up to the front, please. We can't hear you unless you're up here in front of the
Oh,
camera.
yes.
We have an illustrious guest from the El Paso Museum of History.
Yulia Bussinger.
Director.
Thank you.
Turn to the cameras if you don't mind.
Being at the History Summit, I just can't help myself. I have to say something, how proud I am what El Paso has about the heritage and the tourism. 5 years ago, I joined the El Paso Museum of History, and I was amazed. I didn't know so much about El Paso's history. And even the museum that the citizens of El Paso built, it is already small, because we have so much to share with the community and with the tourists coming to El Paso. I would like to mention that there is another museum, El Paso Museum of Archaeology, and anytime in Northeast El Paso, anytime when we have guests, especially from international guests from Europe, for example, I'm bringing them to many museums, including the Archaeology Museum. And I'm really amazed that when I plan their trip, there is always no time. I just can't get them to go to another place. They're so much in love with El Paso Museum of Archaeology because this heritage doesn't exist at any other places. So this is a wonderful opportunity to include many museums as part of the heritage tourism. So I have much more to speak, but thank you so much.
Thank you. Yulia, we get the idea that you're enthusiastic about El Paso. And also, we get the idea that there's some new technology coming, and it's going to be a lot of fun for all of us to take a look at because it's our digital wall.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's going to be interesting to see how we program that.
See your excitement?
Oh, yeah. We appreciate you doing that. Also, any last thoughts from the panel up here, including Rosa?
Well, go ahead.
And thank you for coming. I was born just 1 block away from here. 2. 620 North Santa Fe. The freeway is right on it. I used to play where the museum is. My grandkids say, Grandma, you were born right there in the middle. I said, didn't the cars run over you? No, they didn't. We didn't even have a freeway.
Okay, now you know what you're going to get when you have your demonstration at 2 o'clock. Rosa, and what you're going to do is the dance history, right?
A little bit of the dance.
And you have some props that you're going to work with?
Yes.
All right, we'll clear out of here in a minute, and we'll give that to you. All right, any more quick thoughts up on the panel? Oh, here comes Fred. Go ahead, Fred.
Buenas tardes. My name is Fred Morales, El Paso Juarez historian. I wanted to bring something very important to you. I grew up in the barrio of La Chihuahuita, Little Chihuahua. And it was created in 1814 when Ricardo Bruzuelas built a 20-room rancho right there where the old El Paso Laundry building is located. So the year 2014 marks our 200th anniversary. No other neighborhood in the city of El Paso can beat us. Not even the land grants awarded to Juan Maria Ponce de Leon in 1827 and 1830.
That sounds like a challenge, Fred.
Yes. It is because nobody will really take me up on this challenge.
When you're right, you're right, dude.
Okay,
The facts
okay,
are the
okay.
facts. I got news for you.
Okay.
Fred Morales is almost 99.99% right.
But anyway, folks, this is a serious issue. Our neighborhood was the origin of the Chamizal dispute, going as far back in 1865 when Don Benito Juarez addressed the issue to Washington officials when Pedro Garcia became the owner. Chihuahuita is the Ellis Island of the American Southwest. Many immigrants and refugees crossed through Chihuahuita at La Garrita, at the old Custom House port at the end of South Santa Fe Street. Just like Miami, New York, San Francisco, were other Ellis Islands of America. Another reason why Chihuahuita can boast of its proud history was that because during La Revolución Mexicana, it was the most affected of any other neighborhood. The first stray bullets killed 2 residents in that area. It was the observation deck for watching the battles in Juarez. Thousands of El Pasoans flocked to the River Levy River just to witness the battles. Hundreds of different journalists from not only all over the country, but all over the world converged on Chihuahuita to cover the Mexican Revolution. Those 4 interesting items, being the oldest neighborhood in El Paso, being the origin of the Chamizal dispute, its role in the Mexican Revolution, and for being a corridor for immigrants and refugees, was very historical in its own way. And I ask you people, since Chihuahuita has been a victim of media and historical cleansing, that you please support us. Our neighborhood is so rich and diverse in its history, covering 200 years. I ask for your support in promoting it, especially the elected officials, people in the Hispanic community. They have never come to our aid, and I'm asking you to please
Here's your
support
chance.
us.
This is your call, Fred.
Okay?
Thank you.
Because Chihuahuita is a Mexican barrio. Okay, there's where it all started, Rosa. Es la semilla. It is where everything popped out, and that's where El Paso grew from. It didn't grow from downtown El Paso.
Fred, thank you. As always.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. And it's obvious there's passion.
Yeah.
There's passion in El Paso.
There's no passion in this room. Just ask
Comments
him.
from the panel.
Well, you
Senator.
know what? If you want comments from me, I think it's appropriate that he came up here and talked about Chihuahuita and the significance of Chihuahuita. This is what we started the conversation about, that there is so much history in our region that people are not familiar with, including ourselves up here on this panel, that as we hear the eloquence of why Chihuahuita matters, as we hear about Hart's Mill and the McGoffin home and Waco tanks, and we can go on and on.
We have so much
This
history,
is
it's
what
kinda
I
hard to
this
put it
is what I
into
opened
one
up
show.
with,
Yeah.
that we have so much to offer that what we need to do is to invest in these resources that we have
Fred, thank you.
and come together on it. That's what I say.
All right, we're about out of time here. You got one last thought, Bernie.
One more quick spot here.
Guys, I want to thank you all very much. My name is Henry Flores. I'm with the Paso del Norte Paranormal Society. Hold on. And hold on. I do want to say, Mr. Morales, this panel does support local history because Miss Acosta has been on my ghost tours over in San Elizario. Okay? And they do a great job supporting us. We're now here in downtown El Paso. We occupy the Wigwam Saloon, former location. We've done our ghost tours and historical tours in San Eli, Concordia Cemetery. We've helped out the McGoffin home also and other places. Hart's Mill, we love Hart's Mill. You guys are awesome. Thank you. All of you, yes. But this is what we're doing. Instead of talking about the history, yes, we all want to do it. Now we're doing it. We're bringing history back over to the Wigwam Saloon, to that former location. Now we're going to work with Visit El Paso to bring tours here during the day, also in Spanish. So that's going to be a very big positive for El Paso.
Don't forget Japanese because they really care about Old West.
Oh, ni hao.
Oh, yeah. Henry, thank you very
There
much.
you go.
Henry
Thank you.
One last thought for Melissa. Melissa, here.
Loud anyway. No, I want to thank Henry and his group. This was a networking issue that helped Concordia Cemetery add more money to our coffers to help us to take care of and preserve the cemetery. This is important. This is a community getting together. And I just wanted to thank you guys. You helped us a lot at Concordia.
Okay, Bernie, one last one. Ben Fife.
Yes, sir. Yeah, Ben Fife.
Just really quickly, I want to thank the panel. I actually want to thank everybody in this room. I think no one is in doubt that we are an area that is incredibly rich in history and heritage and culture. And what I would say, actually, I think one of the things the senator said that really resonated with me is when we look at communities like Santa Fe and across the Southwest, these are communities that sort of figured out their messaging and how to tell that story to people outside the region decades ago. And I think the challenge has always been here is that we have never really all been able to get together and have dialogue like this and really think about how we move this community forward. So I really want to challenge everybody in this room to take advantage of the fact that we are in the middle of a renaissance in this community. We have a political climate that is incredibly supportive of these types of initiatives, and our economy is getting to the point where we're ready for this as well too. So this dialogue today is so important, and I just challenge you to keep that dialogue going. Network and make sure that you're thinking about collaborations and connecting and working together, because as one of us gets stronger, all the rest of us get stronger. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ben Fife. And Ben Fife is the acting director of the Museum and Cultural Affairs Department. All right, we are out of time for this event. Emma, you have one last thought?
Yes. First of all, I want to thank all of you for being here today. I think this is so important. But I'm going to go back to education, educating our children at the schools, teaching local history classes so that the whole community knows about our culture and our history. I think that is so important. I'm going to go back and I'm going to champion a resolution to do just that. And I'm going to put the senator on the spot to say we need to teach local history classes in all the classrooms in El Paso. And with that, we also need all the entities, the government agencies, as well as the non-for-profit sector to get together and use the resources that we have, whether it's the state, the city, the county, the school districts, because we all have history and we all need to work together to promote this great history that we have in El Paso. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Perez, last word.
Just as a last word, I think it's really important how it is we gauge young people. I mean, the point was made by the senator when he said that there are still people in our community who have that connection to our history. But what's going to happen when the next generation doesn't have that connection? I just found out from my grandmother just a few months ago that there's 4 generations of my family buried at Concordia Cemetery. I didn't know that. And so, I told my grandma, I'm like, Grandma, what? I told her we should really go check this out, but that's, we've got to think about the future and how it is we're going to preserve that history to the next generation, because ultimately they're going to promote it for us as we move forward.
All right, with that, we have to close this out. Thank you all very much. I want to thank the panel, all of the elected officials, all of the people who worked on the summit. We thank you very much in the radio and audio room, Bernie at the commission. Everybody, thank you for coming. Let's talk history. And remember, Texas history begins in El Paso. Thank you.
The best line I've ever heard. I don't know why the city doesn't adopt that.
This is the wilderness of West Texas. Raw desert beauty almost untouched by man. 7,000 acres of territory cut by a single road. Morning light reveals the geological riches on the eastern slopes of this desert mountain. A mountain range that rises to more than 7,000 feet and stretches for 15 miles. So it might be a surprise to learn that these majestic mountains, with their rugged canyons and natural springs, are inside the city limits of El Paso, Texas. TV production for this program was provided by Capstone Productions, Inc. and EPHistory.com, the website for TV documentaries on DVD and information about our webcast and radio broadcasts about El Paso history and heritage. Thank you for watching.